it's really difficult to get a great first paragraph. And if your teacher's worth anything, probably they're going to go through your first paragraphs and really kind of tear them apart, particularly in English and writing programs. You only have a few seconds, really, when someone picks up a paper in order to grab the reader. Like, I'm marking thousands of papers a year. Like, how many times do you want me to read, so-and-so was born as the first line, or in today's society, or something like that? So you really need a great way of drawing the reader in and then guiding the reader along. And once you get a first paragraph down, and you can do it really well, so that you can hook the reader, your professor, or sometimes an editor if you're writing an article, or maybe your classmates if it's a peer piece, and then to give the thesis and to guide the reader through what the paper is going to look like. That's really tough to do, and to do it in a creative and fun and invested way that also communicates confidence and value and professionalism. Really tough. So what I thought I would do for this first paragraph tutorial, rather than sit on the screen and try and write one with you, is actually show you one that's not, which is good, but isn't the end of the world. And maybe we could think a little bit about how we could change it. And so I decided to show you one that was written by me. I wrote it with someone else, co-researcher Charlie W. Starr. Charlie and I wrote this first paragraph, but it changed a lot through the editing process. And in the end, I don't know how much we really had connected with this first paragraph that was left. And so I thought this would make a good paragraph for critique, because it's okay, it's fine, it does its job, but maybe we could make it more exciting, more interesting. So you can see, first of all, I've set it up like MLA format, even though this was landed in a journal. I think it was published earlier in 2020. And it was Zainzuk Journal is a peer-reviewed journal, which means it's an academic journal. So when we wrote this paper, we submitted it together in the way that they asked us to, and then it went out to 1 or 2 or 3 or several readers who then offered critiques back on the paper. We had to address those critiques and then resubmit it for publication. It's a lot of work and very rewarding in my understanding. I like it. Okay, so, and what this is about is that Charlie and I discovered in a library, in an archive. He made the initial discovery, and I went to Oxford in England, to the Bodleian, to confirm the discovery, to make sure that it made sense. And it was really a discovery of what we think was C.S. Lewis's first attempt to write a series of letters from the angelic point of view. Lewis wrote the Screwtape Letters. C.S. Lewis, who is the author of Narnia, he wrote the Screwtape Letters, which are advice from a senior demon to a junior demon, and they're trying to get a soul into hell. In this case, we read this piece as the Screwtape Letters as about spirituality, what it means to have healthy spirituality, but looked upside down. And C.S. Lewis always said that you should actually also, if you're going to have demonic letters, you should have the angelic side in order to catch the vision of this. And so we found what we think is Lewis's one-paragraph attempt to try and write an angelic letter, or an archangelic letter, like from the Archangel Michael to a junior angel who's trying to help somebody along in their path of spirituality. Well, okay, so that's what the paper is about, and it's pretty exciting. It's an exciting discovery. It's unique to us. Nobody else has put this together before. We get to offer this to academics who want to know what C.S. Lewis's writing life was like and the things that were going through his head. But it was also an important piece for not just academics, but for readers that love C.S. Lewis's material. He wrote the Narnian Chronicles, sold well over 150 million books since he started writing 100 years ago. It's a tremendous project, and he's a really important author, and so lots of people are interested in what we have to say here. So how do we begin? Well, we've got it in MLA format. Our titles, our names, where it's going. There's no professor name in this case, and then the date. Then we have the title here at the center, the Archangel Fragment, and C.S. Lewis's World Building Project. And in the end, I think actually that's an okay title for what we're doing. Not terribly fun, not terribly sexy, but interesting. All right, and so how do we introduce this topic? And what we chose to do was we chose to start with Lewis as the author. We need a hook. The first thing you need in a first paragraph is a hook. When it comes to writing books, we usually cannot know about the paths not taken. Okay, well that's not actually that bad. Sometimes we know what books the author hasn't written because he or she has told us about them. In Ella Montgomery's journal, she talks about all the books that she's never written. We often find manuscript discoveries. Most of the works that we read of J.R.R. Tolkien are not actually written, finished by him. They're all in manuscript form and finished by later editors. So sometimes we have some things left behind, but some authors, for example Terry Pratchett, who recently died, had all of his hard drives crushed by a bulldozer. All of his materials that were unfinished, he ruined them, he destroyed them. He did not want anybody to see what he had not completed. So we cannot know about the path not taken in the case of Terry Pratchett. In the case of C.S. Lewis, he used to burn his manuscripts. He used to use them to light his pipe or to light the fire, and then over the winter the pile of manuscripts that he had just published went into the fire, including Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe is gone forever, this most famous of books. Most of the materials that went into Mere Christianity, another one of his famous books, these are all gone, despite the fact that we would love to see them today, to know his process of writing. But this is also something that the character Aslan in the Chronicles of Narnia, a giant lion, he tells his characters that he cannot tell them about the path that they have not taken. They'll never know. Once they make a choice, everything along the path follows that choice, and he can't show them the other choice. So this is an interesting introduction, but I think that it should be 2 sentences. When it comes to writing books, we usually cannot know about the paths not taken. And then I think instead of just alluding to Aslan and the Narnians, I think we should tell the story. We see this life principle in Aslan, who tells one of his characters, and then goes into it, perhaps with Edmund or, Eustace or one of the other characters, and goes through the time where that character wanted to see what would have happened if they hadn't taken a certain path, but they took this path, and so that's all they know. So Aslan's there to remind them. So I should just tell the story here. I shouldn't just allude to it. Sure, fans will get this, scholars will get this, but it's kind of a cool story. So I should have taken 2 or 3 more lines. We should have taken 2 or 3 more lines to tell the story. Now, and then once you do that, then we go into kind of the link. What does this link to? Where are we going? Archival research, however, sometimes allows us to discern something of the direction an author might have gone. Okay? And if we made this bigger, we would probably say, unlike the paths in real life or in Narnia, sometimes in archival research, we are able to see about a direction an author might have gone. Okay? And this is actually a good transitional sentence for the most part. I think it works really well because notice it uses the same word picture, the same metaphor. Paths not taken, and then direction. Right? Notice we're talking about a journey in both cases. That is actually a good idea. There are other pictures that we could have done. For example, the title has world building. So we probably should have used an architectural image. When it comes to writing books, we can't usually tell about the blueprints never followed, or talk about the buildings that were never designed. Something like that. The books were never designed. So we probably should have used that image since we have it in the title, but the journey image works okay. And then immediately, archival research, we could tell the direction we might have gone. I would maybe want to be a bit more playful here and say something like, for sometimes an author will leave for us pages or a manuscript that shows the potential of what a book might have become. Something like that. Okay? Yeah. And then I would probably use the journey metaphor still. So I would talk about a landscape, or I would talk about an adventure or something like that. I would use that language in that. So I think I would add 1 more sentence here. In any case, I transition then, so we have a hook, and then we have this transition, and now we need to move to what the article's about. Now, we wrote here, in this article, we argue that. I don't love that approach to things. I don't love reading it. However, on a lot of articles, it's kind of nice to hear exactly what this is about. For your writing, this is a good first draft. In this article, we argue that. In this case, there's 2 of us. That's why we say we. when you're writing for me, you can say, I argue that. But eventually you may want to work most of the I's out of your writing, and some professors don't like I at all. Okay? This article argues that. Something like that is how they would want it put. In this article, we argue that from a few hints in the Bodleian Archive and elsewhere, we have discovered C.S. Lewis's singular, by which we mean unique, singular attempt at an archangelic sequel to the Screwtape Letters. Okay? So our argument, so notice we didn't just give the topic. In this article, we look at an archival fragment. We actually give the argument. And a good thesis statement doesn't just say what the topic is, it says what the argument is. Do you see how that works? So it's not this, in this paper, we explore, the friendliness of dragons in late 20th century literature and film. Okay? No, you give your thesis. In this argument, we argue that the friendship of dragons and the friendliness of dragons in late 20th century literature is a relatively new invention after dragons were almost always villains before the 20th century. Something like that. So there's your argument. You want to give the argument. This is why you can't write your thesis statement probably at the beginning of your paper writing process. You can play with it and put down your hypothesis, what you might argue, but you can't write it early. You have to write everything, write the conclusion, then come back and write your first paragraph with the thesis statement. I am arguing that, and then make the language better. So we put down our argument. We argue that we've discovered an attempt that Lewis made to write a sequel to the Screwtape Letters. Okay. Now we're going to describe how we're going to argue that. And in doing so, we're also talking about the implications. By analyzing this small fragment, and it is small, it's fewer than 300 words, and its contextual clues, i.e. where it was in the library and the kind of fragment it is, we can hear the heaven-scented voice of this anti-Screwtape world. Now, we chose to use literary language here. Not all profs are going to love that kind of thing, but we like it. Heaven-scented is a bit too sweet, maybe. Heaven-soaked, but we're just trying to evoke the fact that the Screwtape world describes this demonic room. Basically, it feels like a big old bureaucratic office in a brick building where there's no creativity or anything. That's what hell's like in the Screwtape Letters. So we want the opposite, which is all sense, all feeling, all loveliness, all beauty, all grandness, all hugeness, all philosophy, all action. And so it's the complete opposite, just a fulsome word. And so we never captured the right word. Heaven-scented isn't good, but it's maybe not bad. Fulsome, enigmatic, no. I don't know the word. I still don't know, but maybe you know the word, and you can tell me. Though through this discovery, remember, so we've done our hook, we've transitioned from the hook into our thesis statement. We gave our thesis statement where we gave our argument. Now we're talking about how we will argue our paper. The first step is we're going to look at the fragment and its context. The second step, we're going to unlock, through this discovery, we can unlock hidden links among Lewis's fiction project in the late 1930s and the early 1940s, and the ways he created the speculative worlds of those stories, including the spirit of playfulness and discovery, themes critical to his theological perspective, and potential links that draw his 1937 to 1945 work together into a cohesive whole. So that's a huge gargantuan sentence. That should be 2 sentences probably. First we're going to unlock hidden links among this project between the 1930s and 40s. In this period, he created speculative worlds and so on. And so I should make that 2 sentences. Okay. And then finally, considering the fragment provides an opportunity to test the Lewis handwriting chart and opens up possibilities for future archival work. Okay, the Lewis handwriting chart is a technical tool that Charlie Starr developed and that we test in this paper, and it's a new tool, and so it needs someone to test it, just like all new tools need people to test them. This is a new tool, and so we take this for a spin. It's not a perfect test, but it's a good test. So that's this first paragraph, and it does everything a first paragraph should do, including invite further work at the end of this paragraph. We're really inviting you to do your own work and then respond. Okay, so what does this first paragraph have? It has the right formatting. It's in MLA format. It's got the right title at the right spot. It has a good hook. It could be a better hook if we made it 2 sentences and told the story. And it might even be a better hook if we use the same word metaphor, word image, the metaphor instead of path and direction and journey. We should have used the metaphor on building, right? We should have done that, but we didn't. Okay? And then we moved from the hook into a transition that leads to a thesis statement where we successfully gave our argument, not just our ideas or the context or the topic. And then we talk about how we're going to argue it. And those sentences there look a little bit like what our outline in the paper is. And so it's kind of a way of walking the reader through the paper. This is a useful introductory first paragraph. Now, it's true, your language may not sound as technical and sophisticated in some cases as mine does here. But if you know your topic well enough, you can write a paragraph as good as this one, or even better, as I've taught you how to do. So always remember the key fundamental things. You want to grab your professor, your reader, your editor in an amazing way that makes us want to read the whole paper. Then you need to transition somehow and go to a thesis statement that tells me your whole argument. Okay, you want to use imaginative and solid prose to do so. And then finally, you want to tell me how you're going to argue your paper. So it's kind of like tucking your outline into a sentence that then leads into the rest of the paper. This makes a successful first paragraph. And to be frank, if you nail the first paragraph, usually you will do well in your paper. Professors love seeing a great first paragraph and can then, once they know you can write a good paragraph, they can help you make other parts of the paper better if they tend to be lacking. All right, well, this is my tutorial. Let me know if you have any questions. Send me an email or a personal comment, and I will make sure to answer it. The key is, if you do this first paragraph, I think in many cases this is about 1/3 of the mark of the whole paper, and sometimes even more. So, good luck in your adventures of writing.